RetroDaze.
I don't know what it is about movie marathons, but they invariably stoke the nostalgia fire deep in my chest. Pair the movies with the right food and beverages, toss in a few era-appropriate decorations, inject retro gaming intermissions, and you've got a perfect time capsule in which you can escape. But more than anything else, the movies must be chosen with care. There are 3 quintessential movies that came out in the 1980s featuring groups of young friends on adventures that never fail to do the trick. These movies span a range of genres, making them a perfect triptych of entertainment and subsequently causing me to not only start thinking of them as a trilogy, but also grouping them together for marathons. To be clear, there are no connecting plots, characters, or even directors. What makes these movies part of a singular trilogy, well, at least in my warped mind, are the following 4 rules. As if this particular requirement weren't already obvious, all the movies on this list must have been released in the 1980s. Second, they must feature a group of friends who are younger than 16 years old. This narrows down the potential candidates substantially by eliminating fan favorites like The Lost Boys and Flight of the Navigator, because those movies, although they have moments of kids banding together, are largely about solitary protagonists rather than a group of friends. Still, there are plenty of other movies, and arguably more popular choices, that fit. Take Stand By Me, for instance. Well, that's a classic 80s movie featuring a group of friends under the age of 16. However, the third requirement rules this one out. The movie must not only be released in the 1980s, it must take place in the 1980s. Stand By Me takes place in the 1960s and is thus disqualified from this trilogy list. Finally, our 4th rule is that each movie in the trilogy must be representative of a specific genre distinct from the other 2 movies. In this case, our 3 movies represent the genres of action-adventure, science fiction, and horror comedy. Based then on these requirements, RetroDaze's unofficial 80s kid film trilogy is as follows. The Goonies is a classic 80s movie that captures the spirit of being a kid. Even as terrible things are going on in the adult world, the Goonies keep hope alive and set off on the kind of adventure I always used to dream about when I was younger. What kid doesn't want to find a map that leads to an underground maze serpentining its way to a long-lost pirate ship filled with treasure? All in a day's work for the Goonies. The bits of reality that leak through and begin to taint their carefree childhoods gave the movie a tinge of horror, working on fears of change and loss. Remember, the entire adventure is predicated upon the hope that they'd find enough treasure to avoid eviction by greedy developers. Many of us experienced moments like these as kids, be it an impending move from your childhood home, a divorce, changing schools, eviction, or something worse. What we wouldn't have done for an escape, for an adventure, for hope.
Don't you realize? The next time you see Sky, it'll be over another town. The next time you take a test, it'll be in some other school. Our parents, they want the best of stuff for us. But right now they gotta do what's right for them. 'Cause it's their time. Their time. Up there. Down here, it's our time. It's our time down here. That's all over the second we ride up Troy's bucket.
But it wasn't all fun and games for the Goonies. Even as they sought this underground kingdom, the Fratellis were hot on their trail, a reminder that this escape was only temporary, and the evils of the world weren't simply waiting, they were giving chase. While it's not a flawless movie, the idiosyncrasies give it a charm that allows for multiple viewings. It's a classic for a reason, and an absolutely perfect fit for this trilogy. Explorers is a 1985 science fiction movie directed by Joe Dante. I won't necessarily call it a hidden gem, but the movie is criminally underrated and too often ignored in conversations of 80s movies. Still, this was probably the hardest choice of the trilogy because the more popular selection for the science fiction slot is clearly E.T. the Extraterrestrial. I'll talk more about this decision in our bonus section later in the video. While arguably not as popular as E.T., Explorers still ranks high on my list of favorites of the 80s. Admittedly, the first 3/4 of the movie are miles better than the last part, and sure, I often wish the movie didn't take such a comedic direction once the kids arrive at their destination, but even with these goofball elements, and I'm being purposely vague here for anyone who hasn't seen the film, I still adore this movie. And of course, being a Joe Dante flick, you can look forward to the inevitable appearance of the always entertaining Dick Miller.
Nice fresh piece of halibut for you. How come this guy never won an Academy Award?
The setup all the way through to the onset of the kids' final journey is breathtakingly nostalgic. I can't quite explain the emotions this movie elicits from me. There's something about the characters' hope, imagination, and curiosity that drives the narrative forward and makes me feel like we really can do anything if we try, not unlike an underlying message in The Goonies. One scene in particular always hits me as being a perfect example of the previously mentioned emotional impact. When the trio is sitting in their newly created spacecraft getting ready for the inaugural voyage, Ben Crandall, played by Ethan Hawke, dumps out 2 huge paper bags of junk food, including granola bars, chips, and foil-wrapped sandwiches.
Wait. Supplies. We need supplies. Before we go, we need
Supplies. Check.
Are you nuts? Oh, come on. You're nuts. Are you crazy? We need to go. Come on. All right, fine. Exterior illumination off. No. It'll be cooler if it's on. Are you? The whole world's gonna see these lights. I mean, all right, we'll turn them off. We'll turn them off when we get out of the creek. It'll be cooler. Okay. Fine. Your way. Fine.
I may have never built and flown in my own spaceship, but this moment feels like every experience I've ever had with movie theaters, drive-ins, road trips, and even at-home movie marathons. Just a bunch of friends piled together with snacks cascading over our laps as we got ready for an epic adventure. For our horror selection, we have the 1987 movie The Monster Squad, directed by Fred Dekker. Despite perhaps being better described as horror comedy, The Monster Squad checks off all the requirements for our trilogy. Even so, I've often waffled on this choice, thinking there were better examples of horror movies for kids from the 1980s. The Gate, for instance, has come very close to knocking The Monster Squad off the list, but at the end of the day, it just doesn't have that group of friends element working for it. Like The Lost Boys before it, The Gate will just have to wait for another marathon. Though light on scares, like the other 2 movies on today's list, we have put a lot of weight into the nostalgia factor. In all 3 of these movies, I can point to specific scenes that elicit a comfortable 80s vibe that's otherwise hard to describe. In The Monster Squad, the scene in question finds our protagonist, Sean Crenshaw, played by a young Andre Gower, sitting outside his bedroom window watching a nearby drive-in screening of a horror movie through binoculars as he listens in through his portable radio. Like that Explorer's snack scene, I can't quite explain why this moment hits me the way it does. Perhaps it's the connection to my own drive-in memories, or the comforting quiet before the storm of Sean scarfing burgers with his dad as he watches a horror movie. Even if you don't get the same nostalgic kick as I do from this movie, there are plenty of absurd moments and memorable lines.
Wolfman's got nards.
Yeah, that one. Easy on the trigger finger, Alyssa, you're stepping on my lines. Where was I? Oh, right. There are plenty of absurd moments and memorable lines to more than earn the Monster Squad's place on our list, even if some of them are, a little questionable.
Give me the amulet, you
biscuit.
I promised I'd get back to E.T., which is why I'm placing it in the coveted bonus slot of today's list. So, listen. E.T. doesn't technically pass muster for rule number 2, which requires the movie to be about a group of friends. Sure, there's the famous final bike chase scene that incorporates almost the entire cast of kids, but remember, those are all Michael's friends. Most of the screen time focuses more on Elliot's relationship with E.T., and to a lesser extent, his family. Compare the group dynamics of the main casts from our other 3 picks to the group in E.T., and you'll see it's not quite the same. But that last scene is so iconic, it nearly blots out my little technicality, and I'm sure more than a few of you would prefer to watch E.T. over The Explorers, so bonus pick. You couldn't see it, but I was doing jazz hands. This probably seems like a lot of work to arbitrarily group 3 movies together, and I'll admit my reason for wandering down this overgrown and winding road is lost even to me. The 3 films simply sit so well together, why not call them a trilogy? This idea has also raised another question. If you were to expand on this trilogy to encompass other genres while adhering to my previously outlined rules, what movies would you add? Or, if you're feeling argumentative, what movies would you have chosen for this list instead of our choices? I'd love to hear about it down in the comments, and if you enjoy our content, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and maybe even activating that ubiquitous notification bell. It really does make a huge difference. Let's meet again next week to celebrate Yesteryear right here on RetroDaze.
Clicky clicky.